Hi, my name is Mike Butcher. I'm the editor-at-large for TechCrunch, and I'm also co-founder of Pathfounder, a new editorial series on global goals, sustainable tech, and impact investing. I'm here joined by a fantastic and illustrious panel to unpack the topic of artificial intelligence and its impact on society, culture, gender, and many other things. But I think one of the things is we're going to also be talking about, of course, at Davos, one of the big discussions is the climate. So we'll also be covering that off. So let us, first of all, introduce each other. You've heard from me. I will pass the mic around and we'll get a little introduction from everybody. So go ahead.
Hello, my name is Nicole Büttner. I'm the CEO of Forensics Labs. I'm part of a Berlin-based venture studio completely focused on deep learning and machine learning. And we build companies and products around deep learning and machine learning. We, for example, have built a breast cancer scanner, one of the first CE certified products around AI in Europe, and we're pushing it in other industry verticals.
Right, fantastic. Helena?
Thank you. Hi, thanks very much. It's very nice to be in such a good company. So I'm Elena Bugia, and I'm the founder and CEO of Data Natives, which is a community of data scientists. We have about 75,000 data scientists around the globe. And we also have a media and educational portal specifically focused on topics on data science, AI, and machine learning, also based in Berlin. And yes, we believe that it's a very important thing to learn together and co-create together. So that's why we're really focused on community and education. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Fatima?
Hey guys, good to be here with all of you guys. I'm Fatima Hamdani, the co-founder and president of Kraus Hamdani Aerospace. We're building aircraft, unmanned aerial systems with non-stop airborne capabilities at all different altitudes, including designing high-altitude pseudo-satellite with the mission to save lives, whether that be warfighters, civilians, wildlife anti-poaching, search and rescue, disaster recovery, and they align really well with SDG. And I'm creating an organization based on triple bottom line, and that's one of the things that we strongly feel. That's why I'm able to attract the best AI and robotics talent that's available to do something that's never been done before, and democratize, hopefully, satellite data so that we can truly do climate change-based migration, monitoring climate change in real time, and layer that data in for everybody else.
Marvelous.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Mojan. I'm Mojan Asfari. I'm the co-founder of Ribbon AI. Ribbon AI is a global non-profit organization towards inclusive AI. We have today over 3,000 members across 100 countries, and we run almost 30 chapters around the world. And our focus is mainly on education, educating the youth, and focusing on educating young girls. So we are going to have more participation of women in the field of artificial intelligence.
Fantastic.
I'm based in Paris.
We're all having to share the microphone, and if you hear a little disturbances, that's because there's some people coming in and out of our little venue here at Davos. Now, let's do sort of baseline stuff. AI has become a huge topic in the last few years. I mean, let's do the basics. How far away are we right now? Are we talking about something that's actually sort of live as a sort of concept right now? Or are we talking about something pretty more ordinary, like just basic machine learning, running algorithms over data? Or are we talking about something, are we on the brink of something much bigger? What do you think?
I think, from my experience, we work with a lot of large corporations in Europe, but also a large number of SMEs, right? I mean, let's not forget the backbone of our economies are small and medium enterprise. And what we see is that I'm not so comfortable with the term artificial intelligence always, because it's badly defined. People think of science fiction, they think of robots replacing everybody, Terminator. And I'm much more comfortable with machine learning and deep learning, which are very specific techniques that we use for unstructured data in computer vision or natural language processing. And I think that we can grasp more in organizations. We see, however, that there's so many challenges across various industries, right, to really capture the value and unleash the potential of these technologies to actually increase growth or environmental gains or other things, right? The data quality is still a huge issue.
Yeah.
a lot of our organizations have like these legacy systems, and they're just not far enough in terms of consolidating data sources. And then also, I think, let's not forget the human factor, right? That people are also a little bit afraid, they don't know the technology, so it's also kind of being adopted at a human pace. So,
so it's easy to get some of the terms wrong. So let's get the baseline terms right, that there is a lot, that sometimes AI is bandied out a bit. So we'll try and be specific. But in space, of course, in aerospace, there's enormous amounts of data. And of course, in the kinds of work you're involved in, having to sort of look at troop movements or whatever it is with the drones that you're producing, that you obviously need some pretty heavy lifting. Now, are you having to write your machine and your algorithms in order to take into account politics, or because I think what we're going to get into is we're going to talk about who's actually writing the AIs of the future. What do you think?
So there are a couple of aspects in here, right? AI is very loosely used. So I'm right now using AI to detect thermals and center of thermals and use that for flight. I do thrust only 10% of my flight time, and that algorithmically feeds it into the autopilot. So I'm constantly aware of every environmental condition and how to optimize my flight path. That's AI and machine learning. I have to do object identification, classification to get environmental condition, where I think the maturity of how we're looking at data and what we're going to be doing with that is there are aspects of training data. You touched upon a little bit of unstructured data, but training data set. Machine learning cannot happen if you don't have the right kind of data to actually get the machine to be learning. And that's a huge aspect of it. That's where persistent data comes into play, or when we think about a sensor as a sensor as a sensor, it's an IoT device. So I'm essentially creating an IoT infrastructure across multitude of altitudes, going up to 65 to 85,000 feet AGL, collecting that data and layering it in. And also when you think about different types of data, so it's not just spreadsheets that you're merging visual data with frequency data, with other aspects, and then you're making it actionable. The key is reducing that gap between data to decision so that you can make it actionable, and then how do you remove biases?
Right.
We as human beings don't know when our biases get introduced. When you talk about AI and biases, and I think that leads well to all of the other topics we're going to be talking about.
Well, you've handily allowed us to segue into that. So, Ellen, I know that you're doing digital data natives, right? Data natives, digital natives, of course, is a common term these days. But data natives is your organisation. So, one of the things you're interested in is how AI might be affecting marginalised communities. Do you want to sort of unpack that a little bit for us?
Thank you. Yes. So actually, funnily enough, you said digital natives. The term data natives was coined from Monica Rogotti, who was the head of LinkedIn, data science at LinkedIn in early 2000s, I think. And basically, she talked about this new generation of people who are using, they're not only using technology, but they are expecting technology to serve them. So as you said about data, it's all of these things that they're collecting, all the different applications are collecting so much data about us that they can personalize our experience. So when it comes to marginalized communities or having bias, for example, in the data set, that's when you need to introduce different data sets from different communities to be able to have a plurality of opinions and to actually not only focus on one solution. So for example, when we're talking healthcare, if you only input data from a specific community of people, which is middle-aged, let's say white men, then the data would only target those people.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have any results that would reflect any other people and invite them in the conversation.
Right.
So that's what we're trying to do.
Go ahead.
And what we really need to also consider is at-edge processing. This at-edge processing is being used for so many aspects, even things like weapon systems. And if the folks who are actually programming some of this are not aware of the biases that can happen as the code itself redefines itself when it is running. AI is not just a code you've tested once and you've deployed, it keeps redefining itself. So there's a lot of aspects of that you have to consider.
Well, goodness me, we could do this for hours, to be honest with you. Well, I'm going, but Mujan, I want to bring you in because you established Women in AI, the organisation based out of Paris, now an international organisation, to address some of the potential biases and to get women into the subject and the industry effectively. Now, first of all, I'd love to hear what sort of reaction you got when you started it. Did people think, you know, well, why do we need that? I mean, AI is AI, it doesn't have a gender necessarily. And then, what sort of learnings have you got since you've established Women in AI and where you're going next?
Sure, Mike. So first of all, I never thought that I'm gonna create Women in AI. It started through an event that I co-organized with a friend of mine. It was a hackathon on AI, and it turned out that we were only 4 girls out of 100. And the question came from a mentor who was a guy, came to me, hey, Mika, how do you think about your event? I said, what about it? Like, yeah, so we have like four girls. What's the reason why it's like not any? It's not interesting to women. So we thought that at that time that we need to do something about it. We thought maybe let's go to different events. Let's engage more women. But my personal experience was that I was going to meetups. I have an engineering background, but I never studied AI myself. So I was not really comfortable with the topic. I wanted to learn more, and I was feeling a little bit separated and isolated at these events, not really welcomed. Like maybe I had a question, but people were really, really technical and I wasn't there. So I was feeling really uncomfortable. And I felt this need of creating a safer environment for women to excel and to freely ask their questions. Unfortunately, it's a lot about the confidence, and we learned that if we separate these sort of workshops and classes, women can become better and excel more. So we started organizing workshops for girls, and we focused on the age between 13 and 17 because we realized at the age of 15 is the time that girls start to think so what they want to do, what they want to study, and normally they don't go for engineering and STEM. So that we had actually really good feedbacks, and we are trying to track their path. Where are they going to do to study? What are they going to decide for their work later? And we also really work closely with corporations to tell them why they need to have more diversity in their field. At the beginning, it was really hard. So I was going to events, and people were telling me, "But why are we doing this? We don't really need that." And I remember you told me about the data analytics panel you had that a guy was asking in the audience, but there's no problem. We don't see the problem why we should talk about diversity. But I do believe that we are now 2020. We still really far from parity. The leadership positions in AI is like 10% globally. If you go just to see the position in general, it's like 20%. So it's not a lot. And we're talking about bias. Products are really biased because AI is the extension of the people who are creating it, and we are facing this syndrome of white man syndrome. So
right.
Sorry, can I just add one quick thing? Just when we talk about equality and diversity, we talk about men and women and color. There's a lot of aspects of inclusion that gets missed out. There's transgender. There is other angles of that. That how do you create a safe space for everybody and all types of
diversity.
Yes, exactly. So that's another. And then in AI teams, how do you include psychologists and sociologists, because it's no more just a technical thing.
So basically, recently I've heard a lot from the CEOs of the company and the HR directors thinking a lot to hire developers who have different backgrounds, like exactly sociology, psychology, because if somebody is creating a product for, let's say it's running on personality of the person, and they want to create something which is ethical, right? If you're purely technical, just thinking about how to maybe write a code, you might create something that is going to harm people or totally dismissing the dark side of it. And that's the cross majors, cross studies is really important.
Can I add something on this? Sorry. Well, on that point, actually, I think that it's very important that actually data scientists themselves and developers have part of their role when they start working, some rules, some regulations, responsibilities, feel responsible, like a doctor feels responsible, you know? You need to feel responsible, your data ethics. like as an ethicist, you need to have data ethics.
Well, because you're in the world of AI, people with creating algorithms that might have biases. You're obviously dealing with entrepreneurs. Do you entrepreneurs think about these kinds of things? The mindset of entrepreneurs is, let's just get it out, launch, move fast, break things, Mark Zuckerberg, etc. And they don't really think, move fast and break society. Oh, what have we done now? I mean, do entrepreneurs that you speak to think that way? Or how are we training the next generation of entrepreneurs coming through the system, getting funding to think in this way?
So I actually think within the venture studio, we're always kind of working with new entrepreneurs to launch new verticals. And I'm very encouraged actually by how deeply they reflect on what to do, right? These are all very talented people. They have exceptional skills. We have like astrophysicists, top-notch engineers and so on. And they're really thinking, I have a skill, what am I going to use it for, right? There are many problems to solve, but I actually want to use it to solve a problem that matters. So for example, in the healthcare startup that we built, where we have a breast cancer detection tool that's now CE certified and can be clinically rolled out across Europe. There was a lot of, we put very high ethical standards in us because we were one of the first companies to actually go through the certification process, and the actual regulatory agencies, they didn't have experience with it, right? So we were very rigid because we didn't want to endanger sort of technology, right? People are already kind of afraid or have reservations about it, and we really want to say, okay, we have a very high standard, and we apply this, and also very high ethical standard. And I think that proved to be very, very good, and I think we can even push it more because the agencies didn't actually check everything we did right. We were very sure we did really good work, but they were not yet there to actually check the quality of the algorithm. For example, for bias, right? It's still kind of, they're reading through 1,600 pages of documentation, but they're not actually, don't have test data sets, all these kind of things to actually test these products.
Mike, one last
Go ahead.
aspect of that, as an entrepreneur myself, if I want to attract robotics and AI talent from the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, triple bottom line comes in at hugely. So it's not just for, hey, I want to do something for the planet or the sustainability, but retention rate, attraction of talent for an entrepreneur. Where I think the gap is that education also in investors. How are we involving investors in that conversation so they're investing in entrepreneurs that are focused on triple bottom line and other ethical ways of doing AI and other components?
Right, yeah, and triple bottom line being not just thinking about shareholders, but thinking about society, the impact on society, the impact on culture, diversity, what were the other lists?
So people, sustainability, planet, and then bottom line.
People, sustainability,
And
planet,
profit.
and profit, eventually. We've got to pay the rent. Now, this is a real quick fire discussion here at Digital Davos. There are many subjects we could go into, but of course, finally, in the closing minutes of our discussion, one of the biggest topic, of course, everyone is talking about here is, as Mr. Trump eloquently said, "I'm really into the environment," the other day. And during the World Economic Forum, just yards down the road here in Davos, Switzerland, is an enormous discussion going on about how we're going to deal with the climate crisis. Climate doesn't matter what you're talking about. Climate crisis, climate change, global weirding, things are going odd, and we've got to address it. And there's just basically too much carbon in the atmosphere, and we've got to figure this out. Now, so from your perspective, are you guys thinking? Are you guys? That's a terrible thing to say. Are you talking about climate in your daily businesses? Climate tech is now a space that's enormously taking off. Certainly in satellite data, we need satellite data to be able to address climate issues. Let's go all the way down, and then we'll cap off. Yeah.
So we're basically looking at different use cases. I would say it's basically something that we think about in every venture. We have some use cases basically that are very much focused towards how we can use resources better. For example, we're looking at use cases in synthetic biology, like how to create biofuels and these kind of things out of our cells, and I think that's very interesting. And
to replace fossil fuels.
Yeah, to replace fossil fuels. So I think those are going to be very powerful applications driven and aided by AI, for example. So I think those are some of the topics we're
Yeah.
looking at.
Yes, so from our side as well, like it's one of the most important pillars right now to look into the impact. But if anything from the conversations here, what I would say that I took away is that not only for us as companies or for us as a community, what we can do, but actually to activate everybody and everybody to jump in even if they don't know how to do it. Because I think that's one of the questions right now with the climate and the environment, that we know that something is going terribly off, that there is an apocalyptic vibe, but essentially we need to all jump in and commit to reduce as much as possible, and also from, I would say, from within and from us as people. So I would say also as a person, I carefully think about how I consume things, how I buy things. As I'm a consumer of buying clothes, food, you know, how I travel. So I do think it really has to start from the person as well. But of course, from a community perspective, we have more activities to really encourage that. Hackathons that deal with it, topics around it, educating people, and yeah, learning together about it.
And there is an aspect of management, right? I mean, we are today being approached where wildfires, whether that be in California or Australia, is creating havocs. Hundreds of millions of animals are dying or need medical help, and that's going to keep happening. So for us, we are facing it in two ways. One is the management of current situation, and how do you actually bring in data to help, and bring in technologies like unmanned aerial systems to help in those situations, because we are used to custom things. And then the other is, how do you collect data in a proper ethical way so that you can actually figure out how to direct others to do that. And that's where non-stop data comes in at different angles of it. But where I think a lot in Davos, the word circular economy has been coming up quite a lot, and how as an organization am I thinking about my carbon neutrality is extremely important at an employee level. As I'm also in manufacturing, how do I actually use things in a way that I can recycle better, optimize, and that those are aspects that we need to use AI to help us internally as well to optimize.
I think all of us said pretty much everything, but from my perspective, when I look at WEF and World Economic Forum, Digital Davos, and all these basically companies coming here, I think that we need to look more how we're actually operating the event. So this is the first time I'm coming to Davos. I didn't know what to expect, but I heard that all these places is built in our shops, and then they transform it for the event. And then I'm asking myself, what happens to this whole waste? What do we do with it? And every year we're repeating the same. Also the CO2 footprint. So we are all traveling here. I was even expecting maybe I would see a green launch. We have a lot of launch, a lot of brands. So where is this that we could actually go and maybe see some innovations happening? And we see a lot of plastic cups everywhere, and this is really something that we should be concerned. We're here, we have our leaders coming together to think how we can change the world, and I think, well, it's the responsibility of everybody. I of course can help, communities can help, but I think that we need to think more wisely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the impact of a big conference, I don't know about you, I go to conferences and all those lanyards, all those things that we wear around, and what happens to them? There's a lanyard graveyard somewhere. But the environmental impact, I guess eventually at some point you're going to have to get people together. They're going to have to probably take a plane or three to get to a place where they can talk about the environment. But I think it is encouraging now. I think it's greatly encouraging that the tech industry is starting to address this. Definitely, we saw the announcement just recently that Microsoft is going to go carbon negative rather than carbon neutral, which I think is a huge sign up to the industry to get involved. But from my perspective, talking about the subject of AI, climate, diversity, triple bottom line, I'm extremely optimistic that the future is in good hands with wonderful people like you and bringing all of your talents to this subject. I'm so glad this is happening. It's taken a while, but we're getting there anyway. But from us here at Digital Davos, I'd just like to thank our panel again, so I can get this right. It's Fatima Hamdari of Kraus Hamdani Aerospace, Nicole Butner of Morantics Labs, Elena Pugia of Data Natives, and Mujan Asghari of Women in AI, and me from me, Mike Butcher, editor-at-large for TechCrunch and Pathfounder. Thank you very much for joining us for this discussion here at Digital Davos. Thanks.